Welcome you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. To ask a question during the question and answer session, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's is being recorded. If you have objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Michelle Bond. You may begin.
And welcome to the VISTA webinar series, Like You Mean It, Communicating About VISTA. My name is Michelle Bond, and I am with Campaign Consultation. We've been working closely with VISTA to give you this series, and are excited to get started today. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope that today's topic is of particular interest and assistance to you as you go through your VISTA year. Many of you may find you're having difficulty either explaining your connection to VISTA or AmeriCorps or national service within your community. And so what our hope is that with this webinar we can give you some background information, some specific talking points, and more importantly, tools and resources to help you shape your own message and to tell your own VISTA story. So if you would, please take a look in the right-hand portion of your screen. There should be a few poll questions there shortly that we would love your feedback on. This will just give us a sense of who's on the call with us today and what types of information you're looking for. And we have a great team with us today who I'll introduce in a moment, but first I'd like to turn it over to Robin Stegman, who will be our technical support person driving us through today's session.
Michelle. I'm here to just give you a couple of tips about how to use WebEx to get the most out of this webinar today. You'll see already we have a Q&A feature. This is a great way to submit questions that will be either answered in the Q&A or held for the presenter during one of our question and answer periods. We'll make sure to get to every question that is submitted through the Q&A. If for some reason we are not able to get it through the webinar, we will send the answers in a follow-up email. We'll be enabling the chat feature in a moment. The chat feature is a great place to share tips, resources, and ideas with other attendees. We ask that you only use the Q&A feature for questions. That way we can forward that to our presenters. The chat is a great way to share your ideas about the content of today's webinar. Right now, all the phone lines are muted to keep background noises a minimum. Later on, we will open the phone lines and take some of your questions. You'll see also that we've displayed the phone number and passcode on every slide. So if you ever get disconnected, you can call back in. This webinar will be 60 minutes, but at the end of it, we will keep the conversation going for about 30 minutes after the formal presentation, where we will be able to answer any additional questions you have, also open the lines for resources, comments, and any ideas that you have to share with other VISTAs. After the webinar is concluded, it will be recorded, so it will be available on the Webinars for VISTA page on the campus. And we will have a PowerPoint for the presentation that we will send in a follow-up email along with additional resources on today's topic. And I will turn it back to Michelle.
Thanks, Robin, for laying the groundwork for us today. And also joining us today as part of this web presentation team are Elizabeth Matthews, who's the VISTA Outreach Specialist, myself again, and Kylie Redding, who's a VISTA, who will be talking a bit about her experience, and she serves with Habitat for Humanity in the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So thank you for being with us today, and ready to get started. So today's agenda, we are going to cover a few main topics to help you better communicate your VISTA story. And those are beginning with, Robin, can you advance the slide? Great, thanks. So we're going to start by understanding AmeriCorps VISTA. Many of you obviously have been through PSO, we hope, and have some of the nuts and bolts of the VISTA program, so we'll just give some here and also direct you on where to find some further information either for yourself or share with others in your community. On to explaining your role in the VISTA community. So what makes AmeriCorps VISTA members different in their role and focus, and elaborate on that a bit. And connecting to national service. So how do you specifically, and how does the AmeriCorps VISTA program fit into the larger story of national service and the Corporation for National and Community Service? And we'll hear a bit about that. Then being the face of AmeriCorps VISTA, we'll give strategies and also tips on how to help brand yourself as an AmeriCorps VISTA member, and also some ways to just take that identity in your community and to hopefully help give others a sense of what the program and AmeriCorps VISTA service is all about. Then we'll review some effective communication tools that can help you in shaping your message and communicating about what VISTA service means to your community, and then telling your story. We'll leave you with a few resources and strategies that you can get started on right away. And even during today's webinar, as Robin mentioned, there'll be some time afterwards to continue to share ideas and practice some of the things we're going to go over today, but we will invite you at different parts during today's presentation to start it on that. So be on the lookout for those. And with that, we're going to jump into understanding a bit more about VISTA. And for this portion, I'd like to turn it over to Liz Matthews.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. So I'm Liz Matthews. I'm the AmeriCorps VISTA Outreach Specialist here at the Corporation for National and Community Service. And I want to thank you for joining the webinar today, as this topic is of particular importance. We hope that at the end of this webinar you feel more comfortable and confident speaking about AmeriCorps VISTA and CNCS. So speaking clearly about VISTA and national service benefits everyone involved, you, your sponsor site, those you are serving, and the overall VISTA program. Because when more people understand what AmeriCorps VISTA is, it can lead to more success for you, VISTA, in your community, as well as at your sponsor site. And it's important for your stakeholders to understand that VISTAs are in the community helping to alleviate poverty. When one understands what you're doing, it's hard for them to help you. So figuring out how you talk about VISTA will help you communicate your passion for service as well. And finally, being able to articulate what you have done as a VISTA will help you network and find a job after your term of service, and that's always a good thing. So we're glad that you are taking advantage of this professional development opportunity. Please keep in mind that there are many online resources through the VISTA campus. We have these monthly webinars as well as our social media web shops that many of you may have participated in, and those are every other month. So we really appreciate you utilizing these opportunities that we make available to you. The calendar is on the VISTA campus, and it with all the dates and webinar topics, and you can also watch your inbox because you'll receive emails about the upcoming webinars as well. So what we want to do is take our topic today, talking about VISTA, and we're going to talk about VISTA. There are some key things that you need to include in that conversation. So we just wanted to take a minute to go over some key points about VISTA specifically. So as you all know, AmeriCorps VISTA is the national service program that works to eliminate poverty. We've been around for almost 50 years. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary in the year 2015, something for you all to look forward to. VISTA started in 1965 as a part of the War on Poverty with President Johnson. So we really have a long and rich history, and you take advantage of that and know that you're a part of this rich legacy. Currently, there are over 7,000 VISTAs who are serving annually. They're at nonprofit organizations or government agencies. And finally, as you all know, VISTAs are about capacity building. That is what makes us unique. We leave an organization stronger than when we arrived, and we do that through asking questions and living within the community in which we're serving. So that's a unique part of VISTA, and explaining capacity building gets a little complicated, but we'll get into that a little bit later, and I think you all have some good suggestions for that too. And I also want to point out that even in this slide, we have referred to AmeriCorps VISTA at the top, and every reference after that is just VISTA. You can follow that lead as you put to get promotional materials and when you're speaking about VISTA in person. It's important to identify and leverage the weight of the AmeriCorps brand and to mention it as AmeriCorps VISTA, but you don't need to do it every single time that you're communicating about the program. So those are just some key points to keep in mind here at the beginning, and I will go ahead and turn it back over to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I realized I neglected to mention when I was introducing today's team is we have a few folks who are with us both in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen on the right and also in the chat, which is just above that. So we'll have Sharon Rabb answering questions in Q&A and Shannon McGarry answering and facilitating chat. And we've also got Andy King, who's a training specialist at CNCS with VISTA, into those spaces to answer your questions as well. So you might recognize some of those names. And before we go on to this section, do we have the results ready, Robin?
We do. So we asked in a poll, have you ever been asked to join AmeriCorps VISTA? And 79% of you said yes. So this is obviously something that is a topic that you dealing with on a daily basis. When we asked, have you ever given a presentation about AmeriCorps VISTA, about 23% of you said yes. And when we asked about how, if you include VISTA branding on your business cards, about 22% of you do. About 16% do on their website. 28% do on their email signature. And about 47% of you have an elevator pitch or a standard message. So we are hoping by the end of this webinar, we'll increase the percentage of people who are doing all of those things to talk and promote VISTA.
Robin. So we'll be explaining your role in your community, and I have been seeing some of the chat, and am pleased to see how many of you are excited about this topic, knowing that it could be offered earlier in service, and it's a brand new webinar that we've put together. So we hope to get your feedback at the end, in addition to giving you some information here today that might help us better figure out exactly what the right mix is. But we're excited for your enthusiasm, and we hope that you find it helpful. And someone who was in probably the same position as many of you, Kylie Redding. We first got to know Kylie through a VISTA Campus forum post in which she was raising the issue that she didn't quite feel that folks at her site understood AmeriCorps VISTA and the role and her role. And so, Kylie, are you with us?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Sure. So can you expand a little bit on what I was just starting to say about the post that you put in the forum and really the challenge that you felt like you were having in describing VISTA?
Yeah, I got to, I think it was like 6 months into my service, which I'm almost done with it now. And I was Habitat, and I'm only one of 2 VISTAs, but there's 18 AmeriCorps total. The rest are other AmeriCorps programs, mostly national members. I was just having a problem communicating the differences between VISTA and national, and my job was different than them going out on the construction site. So I remembered from PSO, VISTA Campus, and I logged on and went on the forum and about my problem and how I'm trying to find resources to explain or help explain the difference between VISTA and national and other AmeriCorps programs.
And so do you know what some of those resources were, or what resources you all got from some of the responses to your posts on the campus? What were some of the things that you found most helpful?
No, the first person to reply was Amy Martin, and she had tips about using information from my VAD, which was helpful because if I look back over what my VAD described, it helps me put into words what I have to explain better to everyone else. But Andy King actually replied, and he had a bunch of resources like videos and then the 101 little PowerPoint thing, and I sent that to everyone, and that actually helped because it was like finding the different forms of communication helped people understand.
So it sounds like sharing some of the reasons that existed already was helpful for you. Is anything else that able to put to use from some of that feedback, or anything? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There were a lot of little things people said, like to put in like layman's terms, like talking grant and things like that. That just helped explain to people I work with.
Great. And do you have any sort of advice for other VISTAs who are in a similar situation as you were, or who are struggling to be able to really explain AmeriCorps VISTA at their service site?
I think it's definitely important that not everyone learns the same way. So using different forms of communication to get the message across really helps. Like, some want to see a presentation, some might want to just sit with you and have a chat, or just if you have different ways to tell them the same thing, it works a lot better.
Great. Thank you again for being with us today. And Kylie will be with us for the duration of the webinar and following for any resource exchange or any questions you have. So you can also submit them in the chat or hold on to them until the end when we open the lines. But thank you so much again, Kylie.
Oh, thank you.
So somebody thinking about how you talk about your service is in what makes you different as an AmeriCorps VISTA volunteer. Obviously, serving the community 24/7. That VISTA is not quite a 9-to-5 program. That living and being part of the community are important to VISTA mission and to being able to serve. And so that's certainly something that makes VISTA stand out. VISTA is a one-year program for both personal and community development. There are lots of opportunities throughout your service year to focus on professional development and ways for you to personally be affected by your service, as well as the role that you play within your organization and the needs that you address in the community. And so this is something that is unique to the program. This AmeriCorps is funded by CNCS, which is a government agency, and so with that, there are certain limitations on some of the activities. You may be familiar with the Hatch Act, which prohibits VISTA's lobbying for particular political issues or candidates. So that's also something that makes VISTA stand out. And focus on capacity building and not direct service. And this is the big one that you are familiar with around service, so that VISTAs are really focusing on, improving quality of life through creating systems, structures that will be sustainable beyond them that you're serving. And so that might mean creating a training program, or improving quality of a program, or raising funds for a particular initiative. These are things that make AmeriCorps VISTA distinct, and particularly perhaps distinct from some of the roles within the organization in which you're serving. To drive that point home, I'll turn back over to Robin so she can talk a little bit about her experience. Robin is also a VISTA, and some of the ways she was able to tell her story.
Well, as Michelle said, I am a former AmeriCorps VISTA member, and while I was during my service, I actually made a video for a project that was happening that was encouraging VISTAs to tell their story. You'll see that video in a moment, so I will let the video do the talking. But I just wanted to speak to the point of why, as a VISTA, we really are stressing able to tell your story effectively. There is definitely advantages for all of us to be able to promote VISTA, but there is also an advantage in learning how to convey a message to different audiences. And so when I was a VISTA, I wrote I did videos and presentations about AmeriCorps VISTA, and in addition to kind of helping promote the program, what it helped me do was to help me kind of learn how to do public speaking, how to make videos, and how to kind of craft a compelling message and communicate that to various audiences. And a lot of the work that I did actually helped me after AmeriCorps VISTA secure a job, because I was able to show my employer that I could effectively communicate a clear message, a compelling story, and promote my organization. So we get to kind of, as we go through this presentation, and we look at tips for, how to send out a press release, or how to blog or use social media, how to elevator speech. Think about not only how you can use that to tell your VISTA story, but how crafting that VISTA story and getting experience, all of those different mediums can also help you in your own professional development. So with that introduction, we will play the video. In one moment.
Great. Sharing my desktop, so.
I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. You've probably seen my home state in the news lately for a troubled economy, low graduation rates, high unemployment rates. Growing up, the place that I am standing right now used to actually be a GM auto plant, and a lot of my friends and family worked here, and now it's gone. And this really here was the catalyst for me moving back to Michigan. After seeing what was happening in my hometown, I decided to give up my job overseas and return home to spend a year as an AmeriCorps VISTA. I want to show the world a side of Michigan you don't hear on the news. It is a story of the people and the amazing work they are doing to rebuild this state. Michigan has the innovation of the assembly line, the creativity of Motown, and the social consciousness of the 6-hour workday. These talents shine brightest in our 224 AmeriCorps VISTAs. The impact this has had in the state is tremendous, from people in Detroit who are working with children and working with service learning down there, to people here in my office who are doing statewide cross-stream collaboration, getting disabilities into service. And then me, serving Learn and Serve Michigan. I get to build resources and work with grantees around the state in high-poverty communities. I provide them with support that can help service learning flourish where our state needs it most. This is my favorite wall in our office. All of these papers here are things that you have done to talk about why their voice is important in the community. So bring new ideas for a better future. They care even when nobody else does. My voice needs to be heard so I can make a difference, because I will be a leader of a new tomorrow. I love these because I'm really having a difficult day with my service project. I can look at these and I can really see the impact I'm making, because these youth are the future, and these youth are going to be the super servers that are going to bring everything. I have one of the coolest service sites in America, and I can't wait to share that with you over the next couple of months. This isn't about sharing my story. It's about sharing stories of VISTAs all over the country. So if you have thoughts, passion, a story that you want to share with the VISTA community, contact me. I'm going to include my Twitter, my Facebook, and my blog at the end of this, and I really encourage you all to come and get to know me, and I'd really like to get to know you guys and your service. I am so excited to be able to be a VISTA reporter, and I'm so excited to be able to meet you all either face-to-face or even on the internet. So come contact me, but for now, this is Robin Stigman signing off. And I've always wanted to say that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Robin and past Robin. That was a great example of telling your story. Obviously, getting us to show the spectrum of what it means to be VISTA in serving, but also following through to community impact and those who are benefiting from that service. And so we're going to hear from a few more of you, we put a post out last week, some of our social media platforms, to just ask about the ways that you describe VISTA. Preparing for this session and wanting to really provide some walkaway examples that you might be able to use right away. And as I'm going through these, I'd encourage you to think about the ways that you describe VISTA and to enter that in the chat. Shannon is there, and she'll be facilitating and taking some of those. So feel free to phrase or a couple sentences that you usually use when you're talking about VISTA. So a few that came back to us: a domestic Peace Corps, a walk-talking grant to build capacity and address poverty in our community, service program where members commit year of service to expand the capacity of homegrown efforts to address community challenges, with my sponsoring agency to address poverty and enable people to become more self-sufficient and secure through service. More responses: those who can't help themselves through creative solutions for which there is no funding. Service program that allows me to be the bridge that connects my agency's programs to the needs of my community. My job is to give my program the tools to become a more economically viable and socially effective, to teach staff and volunteers how to use those tools to make myself obsolete. So those are a few of the responses that we got in. And I said, please continue to post those that you have, that you can think of while you're today, and we'll also have an opportunity for you to post some of these on the VISTA forums as well. So if you'd like to expand more than a few lines, please feel free to use the VISTA forum, and I know that Shannon will be able to direct you there as well. Now we're going to promoting and connecting to national service. We've learned a lot about VISTA and how VISTAs see themselves and talk about their role in the community and with their particular organization. And now we want to learn a little bit more about how the AmeriCorps VISTA program itself fits into the larger story of national service. And so we'll turn back to Liz for that.
Well, I can't help but notice the great chat going on. You all have some good ideas as to how to describe what you do. So next, we want to help you connect the dots between what you are doing on a local level with national service. So in a few slides, we're going to cover the organizational structure of the Corporation for National and Community Service, otherwise known as CNCS, and the service programs, so that you can see how you fit into the bigger picture. And while you don't need to know each program thoroughly and all of their details, it's helpful just to know basics so that you can speak about national service. And when you talk to community groups, perhaps you can pique the interest of individuals who might be attracted to NCCC or AmeriCorps State National, some of the other programs. Because at the end of the day, we just want people to serve. So let me ask you this. Do people ever ask you, what is CNCS? You know what? Hold on. I'm going to back up and show you the org chart. So first of all, we've got here the umbrella of national service, and at the top, as you can see, is the Corporation for National and Community Service. As I said, also we call ourselves CNCS because the Corporation for National and Community Service is linked. So feel free to shorten it, and we can let folks know who that way as well. So we're the federal agency that engages more than 4 million Americans in service through Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, and Social Innovation Fund, and also leads President Obama's national call to this initiative, which is called United We Serve. So for CNCS, we have Learn and Serve, AmeriCorps, and Senior Corps. So briefly, Learn and Serve America was focused on service learning through schools, and you can see Robin served with them. However, funds have not been appropriated since 2011, so several grants are still active, but will conclude by September of 2013. So this org chart will look different at the end of this year. Then Senior Corps connects citizens who are 55 and up to become mentors, coaches, or companions to people in need, and to contribute their job skills and expertise to community projects and organizations. And then in the middle you see AmeriCorps. So under the AmeriCorps umbrella, we have in CCC, AmeriCorps State National, and VISTA. So you may know what these programs are about, but really briefly, NCCC stands for the National Civilian Community Corps. This is a residential program for 18 to 24-year-olds who work in very hands-on projects ranging from renovating schools to disaster relief. Then we've got AmeriCorps State and National members, and they provide direct service in a wide range of community organizations. So they offer services such as tutoring children, providing meals, running after-school programs, and as Kylie gave the example, she works for Habitat for Humanity as a VISTA, but they also have AmeriCorps National members at her site. And then last but not least, we have VISTA. So VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, is the AmeriCorps program focused on capacity building activities that support efforts to end poverty. And all of that can also be found on nationalservice.gov. If you need any additional information on explaining CNCS and its programs, please go to nationalservice.gov. So people may ask you what CNCS is, and here's your official answer, as I just said. So when you're using it in print, this is a good way to have it officially written. And you can also say informally that it's the federal agency that oversees AmeriCorps. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And we also, CNCS has developed priorities recently that spell out EDGE. This is an internal call to action, and we wanted to share it with you. So as you can see, the first one is expand economic opportunity, and you can see clearly that VISTA fits in with that first priority because that is exactly what we're all about. And then secondly, drive innovation and impact, so being creative at your site and really make an impact on what it is that you're doing with your VAD. And also grow national service and volunteerism. Help us spread the word and explain why service matters. Why is this important? Why is this important to you? Why is it important to the community in which you are serving? So that's just an easy way, EDGE, to keep in mind some questions as you go out into the community and speak about national service in a broader spectrum. So let's look at ways to promote national service. So how can you help promote national service? Here are several ways listed that you can help get the word out about what national service is and how to get involved. So perhaps some of you on this call just participated in MLK Day this Monday. We, as the VISTA program, encourage our members to participate through the Earned Incomes Tax Credit Program. So perhaps some of you help to educate others on alleviating tax burdens on low-income individuals through that program. That's a great MLK Day project that we've encouraged VISTAS to get involved with this year and in years past. And then AmeriCorps Week is coming up, March 9th through the 17th. And this has always been a great opportunity to get out there and maybe go speak to a high school group or a group of college students or perhaps a community organization that you feel would benefit from learning more about AmeriCorps VISTA. You can use AmeriCorps Week as an excuse to get out there and practice your elevator pitch and really tell them about AmeriCorps VISTA and CNCS. You also want to consider joining your local AmeriCorps alums chapter. Even as an active member, as a current member, you don't have to wait until you're an alum. This is a great way to network and be other national service members and get involved in the community. So just keep that in mind. You can go to AmeriCorpsAlums.org and find out if there's an active chapter in your community, and that can be helpful now and then also when you're exiting service. And sharing your story with those in your community, family, friends, and colleagues. Tell them why you decided to serve, what has motivated you, what are you doing, and it's just a great way to educate and inspire others. So that's all part of creating your own story, your own pitch that we'll get into in a little bit more detail here. So moving right along, being the face of VISTA. So the reason why it's so important to the face of VISTA is because we want to reflect to the communities, counties, and states in which we serve that it is AmeriCorps VISTA that is doing this work. We're behind this. And a lot of local leaders don't understand that the people who are improving their communities are AmeriCorps VISTA members. But through your outreach, we can be recognized on both a national and a state level, and that is just really important. So taking a look at really the benefits of branding. Why are we doing this? What is the benefit of it? Well, it creates greater awareness of AmeriCorps VISTA that can lead to, in your own work, more volunteers, more funding, more partnerships for your organization. You know, go into the community and talk to groups. If more people have actually heard of AmeriCorps VISTA, they're going to be more likely to lend support and to help you out in your mission and in your VAD. Also adds credibility to what you're doing. And then finally, the benefits of branding. It really ties your efforts to a larger movement. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples of how you can tie VISTA to your sponsor site. So these are some examples that we've come across. This is, you're looking at on the left here, this is a business card from somebody who served with Hands-On Central California, and you can see at the very bottom, there's the AmeriCorps VISTA logo, but you know right away, you just see that logo and you know what it is. And then on the right, it's her email signature. It's a great way to, and a really easy way to get the AmeriCorps VISTA brand out there. And I saw some of the chat saying that some folks are working for sponsors that are taking your logo off of things. And that is, hopefully we can help you, give you some talking points to approach your sponsors in a new light and perhaps to them how connecting the dots with what you're doing to the greater work of the organization really does help to benefit them as well. We're also doing what we can on our end to educate sponsors and encourage them to give credit to AmeriCorps VISTA where it's appropriate. So then the next slide, we have promoting VISTA on the web. So if you have a large enough VISTA program, this is the Economic Development Corporation out in Fresno, California. They have enough VISTAs that it made sense for them under the About EDC, so about the organization. The last thing you see is AmeriCorps VISTA. So they have a history of VISTAs at their organization, and so they have the AmeriCorps VISTA and the CNCS logo very prominent, which is great, and then an explanation as to what AmeriCorps VISTA is and the history of VISTA at that particular organization. So that is fabulous. If you feel like that might be a bit much to pull off, there are a couple other places on your sponsor site website that would be very appropriate, and that is under your section. Perhaps you're listed there, but maybe you're just listed under the title that they've given you, which might be volunteer coordinator. But if you can encourage them to also list you as an AmeriCorps VISTA member with the logo, that is fantastic. And then as well, AmeriCorps VISTA really should be listed along with other funders of your sponsor site. So they're along with perhaps you get funding from United Way or local companies that give to your organization because you are an asset, you are a great asset to that organization, and NCS has been able to give that resource to your sponsor site, and to put it along with the rest of the funders is very appropriate. So if you feel comfortable approaching your organization with these really tangible ways to get some visibility, we really encourage you to do that, because that would be great. All right. So next, Vista Gear. Look at all those great T-shirts. We have some really fun T-shirts that are modeled off of some old posters. So this is one from back in the 60s, Make the Scene Better Vista. So you can get these T-shirts along with other items that you can actually co-brand with your sponsor's logo and with AmeriCorps VISTA at cost. So this is run by an organization called National Service Gear, and they are able to work with you to co-brand T-shirts, polos, bags, hats, whatever you name it, and they are a great resource and are very inexpensive. So they are there to help you get the word out in a fun way. And then we've got some publications that are available to you. See the website below at pubs.nationalservice.gov. There's a general AmeriCorps brochure on the far left there, and that's a great piece if you're going to, say, going to staff a booth at a job fair, or there's a local event, or even at a farmers market, or whatever it is that you're getting out into your community and having a presence. You can bring these brochures, and it explains all the different AmeriCorps programs. There's in the middle is our Fight Poverty with Passion brochure, and that gets into explaining VISTA specifically. You also get bookmarks for events such as MLK Day and posters for AmeriCorps Week through this site. So that's a bookmark that has been used and will continue to be used for AmeriCorps Week, the one with Z the Riveter, our national service hero there. And then on the far right is an AmeriCorps VISTA fact sheet, and that's really helpful if you're going to a meeting with other community partners and you want to have some extra information as to explain what AmeriCorps VISTA is. That's really helpful and has some good statistics on it. So just so you can order those off of pubs.nationalservice.gov at no cost to you. So I think I will now go ahead and turn it back to Michelle for questions about VISTA.
Good stuff there. Thanks so much, Liz. And right now we will be looking at the Q&A. And Sharon, are there any questions that we have for any of the presenters?
Yes, there are a few questions that people have asked that vendors would be best to answer, and one has to do with the term domestic Peace Corps. Erica says, "This is what I usually say about our VISTA leader. Told us we aren't really supposed to be using this as a description of VISTA. Is it okay?"
I'll take that one. This is Liz. And obviously, sometimes we like them to refer to VISTA as Peace Corps as the International VISTA. But if your sponsor site is not comfortable with it, then you should probably take the lead from there. I mean, some take the attitude that Peace Corps is well known, and so why not ride that wave? And people really do get it when you say to them, we do what the Peace Corps does, but here nationally, domestically. If you've been given strict instruction to not say that, then I would adhere to that. But hopefully that explains why we do encourage people to still use that phrase.
Thanks. Morgan has a question about a particular program. Veteran Corps leaders, where do VLCs fit into the project? I'm not sure what. Want to answer that? Is that a VISTA program?
Can you question?
The question: where do VLC, Veteran Corps leaders, capital? So I gather it's a program, fit into the project.
I think they're asking in terms of what AmeriCorps program the Veteran Corps leaders fits under.
Oh, I see. Sometimes it does get confusing because there are a lot of places that use the term Corps, and the ones that I talked about, Senior Corps, AmeriCorps, those are our programs, but there are many, like Vet Corps, that's not officially under the umbrella of AmeriCorps or CNCS, but it is a sponsor site that has received grant from VISTA, is what it sounds like.
That answers the question. The next is, I was wondering if you would be willing to address possible ideas or goals for AmeriCorps VISTA Week.
Sure. So AmeriCorps Week is March 19th through the 17th, March 9th through the 17th. And we often encourage folks to use this time to go out there and get the word out. So you can talk to a community group, like as I mentioned, a high school group, college group, to really plant that seed so that you have a group of young people in high school who maybe they don't know maybe they're not ready for college, or maybe you talk to a group of college students and they don't know what they want to do next. And if you go in there with your enthusiasm, your passion for service, and you explain to them what it is that you're doing, and they perhaps already have a passion for volunteering and they realize that they can do this full time, you're really going to spark some interest and encourage somebody to serve in the future. So I think it's a great week to rally around. And perhaps you can also use it as a launching point to have more of a presence on your website with AmeriCorps VISTA. Use that as the week to launch your presence as a staff member or as a sponsor. There's definitely lots of things you can do. And there'll be ideas for it as well on nationalservice.gov. So feel free to check that website, and there are often usually kits that are developed to help you get the word out and give you ideas for AmeriCorps Week.
A question that comes up occasionally on a regular basis: is there a good way of communicating what role a VISTA is not? I know that sometimes my organization sees me as just another employee. What are some ways I can convey my dual obligation within the organization as well as within AmeriCorps?
And Andy, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, Liz. I was
on the spot.
working in the chat. So this was explaining what my role is not as an AmeriCorps VISTA member.
I'll read the whole question again.
Thanks.
Is there a good way of communicating what your role as a VISTA is not? I think sometimes my organization sees me as just another employee. One way is I can convey my dual obligation under the organization as well as within AmeriCorps.
Well, one way to maybe frame that conversation is to let people know that your position, your VISTA position at that organization is entirely or partially funded through CS with federal funds. And so because of that funding, it comes with particular expectations of what it is that you're supposed to do as a VISTA member, as well as some limitations on things that you can't do. So in the limitations, of course, we know about the Hatch Act and political and religious activities, those kinds of prohibitions. Direct service is another one. So if you find yourself being asked repeatedly to substitute and to do a shift in the food bank, or to cover a class for a tutor who didn't show up, of course, in emergencies, we all do what we need to that our organization, our project succeeds. But if it becomes a recurring thing, then you may need to have that conversation that talks about the fact that this is specifically not a direct service program, and that you need to have the focus of your work in capacity building. It's not a quick, short, one-sentence response, and oftentimes VISTA members find themselves having to educate multiple people in their organization again and again until it starts to sink in and people actually get it. So we apologize that that's part of the territory that comes with being a VISTA, but that education within your organization, I think, is time well spent, because then they understand why you're there, how you're contributing overall to the organization, and what's appropriate to be within your scope of work.
Back on what Andy's saying, if you repeatedly are being asked to just answer phones and are really finding yourself doing administrative work, then that's a problem, and you should talk to your supervisor, and if that's not helpful, then go to your state office. because that's not why you're there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both, and we will. We have a few more pieces of the formal presentation to get through, so I want to switch gears. But we will, again, for those who can stay on, be continuing conversation and the ideas and resource exchange following this. And we'll also, I know a lot of questions about recording and the chat and all of that, and this information will absolutely be compiled and sent to everyone who is on with us today following the session. So probably take about a day or two, but you'll get all of these great resources. So this is just some very tools to help you in communicating that VISTA message. The first one I want to talk about is just telling a story. And to tell an effective story, a couple of things to consider. Obviously, your audience. Who are they? What do they do? What are they interested in? What would appeal to them? You want to think about your audience first and foremost when you think about and put some into how you tell your message. And then, of course, it's the message itself. What do you want to get across? What is the most important point? And what you want people to do with your message. Because remember that we want to take this a step further. It's not only delivering your message and it ends there. You want to either compel or ask or invite whoever you're delivering your message to, regardless of the form, whether it's in person or through a presentation or online, to do something with that information, so to help further spread that message. And so with that, we talk about that is something called a SOCO. Obviously, telling your story requires a clear, consistent, and compelling message. And what the SOCO is your single overriding communication objective. This is what helps you focus your message and ensures your audience hears it. And this is something, it's your main point. It's walk away that you want to have, whether it's in an informal conversation or a stand-up presentation or in a grant or proposal you're writing or in a letter of a year-end annual giving letter. It's the main message that cuts through all of your communication so that it's consistent and it's clear and folks know who you are and what you're about. And so consider when you're crafting your SOCO, and this is another opportunity for you to share in the chat or on the VISTA forums what your SOCO is. Some things to consider when crafting that is what serve. Think about what brought you to AmeriCorps VISTA service, whether you heard about AmeriCorps wanted to serve, or whether you knew of a community organization or community need that you wanted to address. Think about what brought you to that service. What difference are you making? This gets at the idea of impact and change in your community, and it's a great vantage point to talk about your service and really what being a VISTA is about, to help people that connection, like some folks with questions were concerned about. What are the contributions you've made to alleviating poverty and building capacity in your community? And this is really important because this does make the idea of capacity building and poverty alleviation more tangible. So what are the specifics? What are some things that you've done that you can use to share with people as examples of that? Addressing challenges in your community. This is another way to talk about or about service, is identify the community need and speak how your AmeriCorps service is helping to address that. And just a program changed you. We talk a lot about what AmeriCorps members are doing within their communities, but what's been the impact on you? This is where I even saw in some of the chat earlier in the presentation people talking about the impact that services has had on them. And that's important because that's what's going to make your message passionate, and it's going to make people remember what you're trying to communicate. And why would you encourage someone else to join? If you think about the reasons why you served, now that you've been through that experience, what would you recommend to other people, or how would you explain it now that you've been through it? All of these things will help in crafting a clear and consistent message. And then tool to use is the elevator speech. I saw one early on give a link to a resource for it, so thank you for that. And many of you are probably familiar with the elevator speech, the idea that if you're in an elevator with someone of importance and you have only that elevator trip to get your get your spiel out and articulate to them who you are, what you're about, and what's important, you want it down to about 30 or 60 seconds. And so in front of us are just a few tips for doing that, and we'll have a chance to practice these later, but feel free to start thinking about it or share one that you've used, because obviously this is a great tool, as Robin indicated, for being able to be heard and to also be memorable. To do that are using a hook to capture attention. So if you have a brief story or idea or event that you can latch onto, that's helpful in starting that conversation. Obviously, tailoring to your audience. If you're speaking to someone who is a stakeholder and you know what's important to them, you want to make sure that those are the points that you drill home. Obviously, be passionate. This is probably the single most thing that people will remember. It's clear in the video that we saw from Robin's contribution that she was really passionate about service and very passionate about engaging youth in service. And that's the part that sticks with you and makes it so memorable. So think about what you're passionate about and make sure that drives your message. And then the thing that people don't think through is ending with an ask. Had this opportunity to articulate your message and talk about why it's important and drive that home, but maybe didn't leave the person you're speaking with something to do, and that's the action piece. And so you want to make sure that you follow up, give them a business card, ask them if you can call them to talk further about VISTA and what they might be able to do with their organization, or simply ask them to attend an upcoming event or sponsor an event or something like that. So be sure you've got a couple asks in mind that are relevant to your audience. And finally, practice. Enough, and we hope that you'll have a chance to do some of that while you're with us today. And then some additional resources for you. AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA is the VISTA homepage that's available on the National Service website, and this is kind of your one-stop shop for learning about the VISTA program, particularly if people are new to it and want to know some of the differences between AmeriCorps VISTA and the other AmeriCorps programs, or how VISTA fit into the larger CNCS story. This is a great resource for that. And then we also have some resources on the VISTA campus. I know many of them have been filtered throughout the session, and got a few places we just want to highlight for you because they're really some of the information about VISTA that can be helpful, particularly, as Kylie was saying, to share with other people if you can't explain it, or if you can give them a resource to in their own time. Some of these places are where you can look. And so the first place I'm going to take you to is About VISTA. So if you're on the VISTA homepage here, you see it's the very top there. And you go into About, you'll see this is a very review page. So you've got a few resources right off the bat. You've got this video that kind of is entitled "This is VISTA," and it talks from multiple people's perspectives, some sponsor sites, some state offices, some area managers, people who are very familiar with the VISTA program, and talk about it in their own words and from their perspective. So that's a helpful tool. We have, on the left here is VISTA 101, which is a resource for potential sponsor sites to help organizations identify whether VISTA is a good fit for their program. And so that's a great resource, particularly if you're having trouble with your organization or your site in helping them understand the fit between VISTA and what you're doing there. And then, of course, resources to both AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA, which we showed you just a second ago, and then the CNCS website. There are some resources in the Life as a VISTA area. which are the history and mission. And this is a list of information that takes you through some of the pieces about the VISTA program and its history, and then also gives you some other media to share, and then also gets into capacity building. These two courses really go hand in hand in terms of helping to explain and operationalize what capacity building is, and then give you a guide for how to get started and how to do it. So I'd encourage you to take at those. And then in the work, there's a whole area on communication and marketing. And so the things we went over today, we just touched base on this and the elevator pitch, but you'll see that there are 4 areas that have resources within each of those having to do with these things. So general improving communication skills, and then broken up into the areas of marketing, using social media, and working with the media, which are all helpful when it comes to communicating your message and communicating about your VISTA service. And as an aside, all of the what we've done around using social media can be found in this area as well. Back to the presentation. I think that we are at a point where we can take some questions via phone. Is that right?
Oh, yes, we do have a few more questions in the question and answer section. Are we going to open the lines at this point? Robin?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Are we going to open the phone lines at this point?
We are at the top of the hour, so I want to be mindful of people's time.
Okay.
But we can take a few more questions if you have them in the Q&A area.
I do indeed. I have a few more questions. And some of them have been being answered in the chat, which was very good. You're perfectly free to answer any questions that you can in any of the sections. It's not limited to just the presenters. And I've been told several times that VISTA can do 20% direct service. When I asked where that information came from, I do not get an answer. Is it stated somewhere?
I haven't heard that percentage, anything that would be in the VISTA handbook. I think what makes sense is, if you're, for example, helping to recruit volunteers to come into an after-school program, and you're building the capacity of the organization that way by getting more volunteers so more kids are served, it makes sense for you to go to the after-school program and see what it's about. So maybe you yourself tutor a couple of times, just so you get a feel for the program. But as Andy mentioned earlier, it's more the exception than the rule as to what it is that you're doing in terms of direct service. I don't know whether Andy has anything else to add to that, but the VISTA handbook is we would find that information.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Liz. And it's, in fact, in the very first chapter of the VISTA member handbook where this information appears. And there's no percentage, but there is some information about when it is appropriate and allowable for VISTAs to engage in direct service. And that is if it's part of your training. So in order for you to understand the operations of your organization, you need to work in the training program or teach a financial literacy class or whatever. That's appropriate. If it's part of your testing out what it is you're developing, so say you design a new curriculum and then you need to actually implement it to see if it works, that's another appropriate way. Or if provide direct service is, again, in a limited way to help train others, or a way of part of the ability and the continuity, so that you are passing things on that you developed. But outlined in the very first chapter, but there is no percentage, but the language is in a limited duration or a limited extent.
I just want to jump in here, actually, because I want to make sure that folks know that there is an evaluation that will be running while we're taking some more questions in the interest of time. And also, let's go ahead and go through the next steps
Sure.
quickly, so then we can open the lines and take questions into the extra time, but we're not holding anybody up.
Super, Michelle.
Sure.
So the next steps, these are just tangible ways that you can start doing what it is that we've been talking about. So sending a press release to your local news and get yourself featured in the VISTA in the news section of the VISTA campus. So if you're from New York City, they may not pick you up in the local news about you serving, but if you're from a small to mid-sized town, that may be newsworthy and can get your name out that way. As we've talked about, so when you walk away from this call, one of the things you can do is see if you can get your VISTA logo on your business card. If you don't have business cards, maybe this is a good way to go ahead and say you need them and get them made so that you can get in the community, and then also adding your logo to the email signature. Making an AmeriCorps VISTA presentation to a community group or your own organization. Maybe you could make that a goal for AmeriCorps Week coming up in March. Seeing a visible presence for AmeriCorps VISTA and CNCS on your organization's website. That just helps all of us. And encouraging the leadership at your organization to credit the role of AmeriCorps VISTA and CS and CNCS in speeches and at public events. This is really important because sometimes you've worked really hard and put together a whole event, and then there's not even any mention of your role in it. And so give credit where credit is due, and hopefully the leadership at your organization who may be speaking at public events can understand that and incorporate AmeriCorps VISTA and CNCS into their language in public speaking. And then finally, don't forget to add AmeriCorps VISTA to your resume. So those of you who are close to ending your service and thinking about what you're doing next, don't just put that you obviously put the name of the organization in which you've served, but make sure that you have that you were an AmeriCorps VISTA member, because that can really open up some doors when you're in an interview. Because if someone sees that and they know what AmeriCorps VISTA is, the chances are you're going to get the interview, and who knows, you may also get the job. Keep those things in mind, and we hope that this helps you out, and I'll turn it back over to Michelle for continuing questions. So thanks, everybody.
Liz, and just a reminder that we're opening the evaluation, and we really do appreciate your feedback. As I said early on, we saw some good comments about it might be helpful to host this session, but anything else about the content or about other things that you'd like to see would be really helpful for us. We are an evolving series, and we're adding and adjusting all the time, so please do share your thoughts and anything that might be helpful to us for improving these. Of course, thank you so much for your participation. We do hope that you can hang with us for another 20 minutes or so for questions and resources exchange. But for those of you who need to jump off, just want to let you know that if you have any further questions, you can contact us always at vistacampus@campaignconsultation.com. And to join us for our upcoming session on February 20th on using national performance measures to demonstrate impact. It's a helpful session about understanding, again, how VISTA fits into the larger CNCS picture and how the work that you're doing in your VADs is related to that. And then only to visit the ongoing learning page on the VISTA campus for an upcoming schedule and for recordings of any past webinars.
Julie, at this time, we would like to open up the lines for VISTAs to be able to share their resources and questions.
Thank you. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your line and record your name. To withdraw a question, press *2. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. 1 moment, please.
Thank you. And so, the lines are open for you to not only share questions, but if you have great resources or tips for other VISTAs, this is a time really for you guys to continue sharing after the webinar is over. While we're waiting for questions to come in and resources, Sharon, do you have some other questions from the Q&A?
The only questions I really have that are important is that the poll now reopened for those of you who could not access it. And a question regarding the slides, yes, we will send the slides out immediately after the presentation. Oops. that's about it in the terms of questions on Q&A, but please continue to use the Q&A, and we will take your questions that way or by the phone.
Great. Well, Kylie, are you still on the line?
Yep, here.
I just noticed that there's been some really great discussion on the chat about kind of tips for sharing your resources, and I just wondered if you had kind of any personal stories or other kind of resources that you could offer VISTAs for sharing their story.
I know how a lot of people, they were kind of honest about, because it's like facing the man. Like, so some of the people you might have to talk to are, you know, boss or the people you're reporting to, and it's kind of awkward. But, I mean, don't be nervous, because I was kind of nervous. But if you start a conversation, it'll end well, you know. Or for question and answers.
Yeah, that advice, Kylie. It's definitely hard when you're forced into a position where you have to explain capacity building or say no to a supervisor.
Yeah.
But it's an important conversation to have.
And it's handy to print out your VISTA handbook and have it with you.
I also asked a question about if they could use the VISTA campus after service, or will it be limited to the resources they can currently access? The question is, will the VISTA, I thought I could use the VISTA campus after service, but will the VISTA campus now become limited as resources?
No, you can enter it as an alum. Absolutely. It is always there for you. So, and in fact, try to have information there of interest to alumni, and that's partly why we started the job board forum. So that's there for you. There's ways that you can submit your story of service. So you can, and then there's also other resources on there, connection to AmeriCorps alums. So no, absolutely, and we just ask that you make sure that you, on your VISTA profile, include where it is that you have moved to, so that we have your pin in the map. You are correctly identified both from your VISTA member service and as an alum.
Have any questions online yet?
It comes from Martinez. Your line is open.
Hello. What's your question?
Go to question. Alyssa Smirch, your line is open.
Hello?
Hello, Laura.
Hello?
Hello. Yes,
hello?
Question? Can you?
Can you?
Yes.
So my question was a lot about explaining what it is to people who don't know. Well, obviously that's the whole point of this webinar. But my question was, there's a lot of people I've ran into that don't know what AmeriCorps is as a whole. I was wondering if you have any suggestions on how to explain that. I mean, Domestic Peace Corps is obviously an option, but I was wondering if you had any other suggestions.
Sure, it's a good question. I think emphasizing that AmeriCorps is about national service, and I would encourage you to everybody to go to nationalservice.gov, and you can look at it has it by organization and by program, and so you can go to the website there and get language that you might feel comfortable explaining in your community. They should have some overarching language there that you can use, but your immediate answer can be that it's national service across the country, and that VISTA is part of AmeriCorps. But I encourage you to go on the site, and there should be lots of language there that you can pick and choose from and see what you're most comfortable with. And Ann, would you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's a great suggestion, Liz, and it is important. And earlier we saw the slide that showed sort of the relationship between the different streams of service within CNCS programs. And it is important because when some years that you're somehow connected with AmeriCorps or CNCS, you have heard of some other program or some other part of our world, and they may want to ask you about that. So it's good to have at least some familiarity with it, and see if you can find language that resonates within your community or that connects to something that they may be familiar with. Because you even have legislators in Congress that, well, we think that Teach for America is a much better program model than AmeriCorps. Somebody ran and said, well, do you realize that Teach for America is an AmeriCorps program? And this congressman didn't understand that. And so, it's not limited to the people you encounter. It's certainly here in Washington, and it's part of our ongoing work and sometimes challenge to help people understand who we are and what we're about. Because if people don't understand that, then it's going to be a struggle for us. So the more of us who tell our story, share our story, and the more we can imprint the name of AmeriCorps and VISTA on the results that we're all achieving and that you're all achieving, better off we're all going to be.
Just to piggyback on what Andy said, so AmeriCorps members serve in more than 3,000 nonprofits, public agencies, faith-based, and other community organizations. And if you use some tangible examples, you can say members may tutor and mentor youth, build affordable housing, teach computer skills, clean parks and streams, run after-school programs. That gives people a real image as to what these folks are doing, and it might help to drive home what it is, AmeriCorps is doing. Hopefully that helps. Thanks for the question.
Your next line comes from Bubba. Your line is open. Third question.
Right.
If you star 1 to ask a question, your line is open. Button.
From whom to ask a question?
Go ahead, it's open.
Okay, I wasn't able to get onto the online presentation for some reason. It put me in. Is the link to that going to be sent out to us in an email, or is that going to be at the Vista Campus website? Where will we be able to replay this at a later date?
The session will be available on the Vista Campus, the same page, webinars for Vistas, where this current session was listed and where all the other recordings are held. And you can watch them at any time. It takes us about a week to get it up there, but you'll see the recording posted.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Here comes from Claire Alfred.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, first of all, for this whole webinar. It was really helpful. The part that was most helpful to me was when somebody asked what the VISTA is not allowed to do and how the organization can to see the VISTA as just another employee. And I kind of been in conversation with my supervisor and executive director about this recently, specifically with administrative tasks, not so much direct service. But I was just wondering if maybe you guys could point me to a guideline or a document of some sort that really outlines what we're not supposed to do as far as answering the phone or things like that.
Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. So the VISTA member handbook is the document that outlines the policies and the guidelines that govern this service. There's a companion piece to as well for VISTA supervisors called the VISTA Supervisors Manual. Both of those documents together file all of the information regarding VISTA service and managing and running a VISTA project. If there's any question within your organization, that's where you should direct your supervisor or others to. And again, I would encourage all of us to look at the very first chapter of the VISTA member handbook. It talks about roles, and under the role of a VISTA member is a section, I think it's called the VISTA assignment description or something like that, and it's in there that it talks about the focus on capacity building and indirect service, and that mentions the limited conditions under which direct service is permissible. It doesn't go into details like you're not allowed to answer the phone, you're not allowed to file. I mean, it doesn't have that level of detail, but it does provide the intent, and hopefully that will give clear guidance to the organization.
Question, if you've pressed star 1 to ask a question, please check your mute button. Your line is now open. Question, if you've pressed star 1, your line is open. Remove the question. Again, to ask a question, please press star 1. If you've muted your line, please unmute your line to record your name clearly. One moment.
So you had a good question you just asked in the chat about getting a supervisor's manual. Do you mind asking that here?
I was just curious because you just mentioned how there was the VISTA handbook, but then there's also the VISTA supervisor manual. And is anywhere like on VISTA campus or somewhere where we can see a copy of the supervisor's manual?
Sure. It's in the section called Supervisors, and it's on the left underneath the calendar. There's a block. It's a button, a big button that says Supervisor Manual. So it's right there. Sure.
Questions from the Q&A?
My mute was on. There are some people who have specific questions about things like getting for training, and I think that that would be a good case where we can go to some of the other VISTAs who have some experience in that to be able to answer that question. That's about it.
We have a little bit more time here, and I see that there are people talking in the chat and sharing resources. Please, if anybody wants to practice their elevator speech or share some resources or some difficulties or opportunities they've had on their site to share their VISTA story, please dial star 1 now, and we'd love to hear you and how you explain VISTA.
Your phone, Alea, your line is open.
Yeah, I do have a question. Not everyone, stays for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or whatever. My question is, as I continue to develop things for the person for the next year, are there any good strategies on things to kind of perhaps leave for them for the next year? A full resource, being that I've already done it.
Sure. This is Andy. Absolutely, there are a number of things that you can do. If you think back to PSO, when we define capacity building and the capacity building activities that is due, we talk about the transfer of knowledge, the transfer of relationships, and the transfer of products. So if you think about your own VISTA service here, what the knowledge that you've gained, knowledge about the community, knowledge about your client or the community that you're serving, knowledge about the services or the programs, what works, what doesn't. Get it in writing writing, put it into electronic documents. A lot of VISTAs create a 3-ring binder, and they, sections, and maybe one section is knowledge, one section is relationships, another section is products. And every time you have a meeting, every time that you create a new partnership, every time that you make a contact in the community, that gets written up and you sit there so it doesn't get lost. It's all in one place. And if not there, when the new VISTA comes on board, you can hand over that, or whoever's there, you put a big sign on top of it, this binder is for the new VISTA. And when that person shows up, hopefully they stumble upon that and find that. So it is one way that a lot of VISTA projects do that. That in and of itself is not sustainability, it's more continuity. Because the sustainability is something bigger that hopefully you're building within the organization and within the community, so that when there are no more VISTAs at your project, and that day will come, we want, and I'm sure you want, your efforts to keep having impact and to continue. But this is a question, and in fact, we are planning a webinar on this very topic coming up in the next couple of months. I was just looking at my calendar to see if I could tell you when that was going to happen. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's I think in about 3 months or so. So if you're still around, and if that's not too late, keep checking, and you'll see it on the calendar.
Okay, thank you.
I just other questions.
And I think we will wrap it up. We will record the chat and Q&A and send that out along with the PowerPoint slide. A recording of this will be available on the VISTA campus afterwards in case you missed any portion of it or want to share it with fellow VISTAs who would find this useful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you next month on our webinar for VISTA series as it continues. Thank you very much.